Hello, welcome to another episode of Wealth, Wellness, and Wisdom. I'm your host, Daddy Shabalala. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about David Mabuza's pension fund and all the court proceedings that have taken place around that. So imagine a courtroom in Mpumalanga. On the one side, we have the former Deputy President David Mabuza's wife holding the beneficiary nomination forms saying that she's the sole beneficiary of the 44 million pension payout. On the other side, we have his daughter who is pleading for tuition fee and lifestyle costs. So this is one of the biggest cases in the industry that's going to reform or tell us exactly how the pension fund is going to be handled. This is not gossip about the powerful. This is about you and me and the pension fund. This is about what happens to your pension when you die. Here's what happened. David Mabuza moved his pension fund from the political bearers pension fund into a private held living annuity fund with Alexander Forbes. So that means that he no longer had a pension fund, but now was governed by the Long-Term Insurance Act. It's a policy now. It's no longer a pension fund. Now here is where the drama begins. In a pension fund, trustees of a pension fund decide how the pension fund gets paid out. There's a section 37C which tells you who are the beneficiaries, who are the people that were dependent on the pension fund, and all the people that were financially dependent on the deceased. The Pension Funds Act governs that. So the drama here is the fact that he moved it from a pension fund to a living annuity. A living annuity is a lifelong policy that's administered by an insurer. It's no longer governed by the Pension Fund Act. But in the insurance world, the policy has beneficiaries, and whoever the deceased has nominated on the policy pays out according to the beneficiary form. Whereas on the pension fund, the trustees of a pension fund are the ones responsible for distributing the benefit to the people that were financially dependent on the deceased. So this is where the drama begins. We have a wife that's saying she's the sole beneficiary of the 44 million rand pension fund. And on the other side, the family is arguing that the money came from a pension fund. Therefore, it should have pension fund laws, meaning that it should have followed the section 37C of the pension fund, meaning that the beneficiaries should be the ones that be getting paid out. And so the case has begun. The judge has frozen the money because they need to decide whether this is pension fund money or this is an insurance policy. This is where the court rule begins. Let's pause here. This is where financial literacy meets constitutional law. And for me to break it down for you, let me use a SWOT analysis. So in SWOT analysis, we have our strengths. Our strengths here is the fact that there is a pension fund law that protects beneficiaries. The weakness here is the fact that there is also policies, life policies that protect the beneficiaries that have been nominated. The threats are the fact that if the policy supersedes the pension fund laws, that means the beneficiaries and the people that were financially dependent on the deceased will lose out. So the opportunity here, or this cost case, is the fact that it will set the precedent going forward. What happens to pension fund money once it reaches a living annuity? For example, let's use another framework, PASTEL. PASTEL stands for political, economical, social, technological, environmental, and legal. So obviously the political side of this is the fact that this is David Mabuza's pension fund and the family is involved. It's a big case and everyone wants to know what's going to happen. The economical side, it's the fact that it's a 44 million rand pension fund. That's a lot of money to anyone. The social side is the fact that we, as the people, also need to understand that this is happening in Africa, in South Africa especially, where we believe in Ubuntu. So the social aspect of this will impact how we as society see the law. Technologically, this also brings the effect of the fact that the beneficiary nomination forms that David Mabuza wanted to change were not changed in time. The intention was there, but he never got to it. So that brings back into saying, what technology are we using to make sure that people's wishes are done? It doesn't need a whole formal paper-signed ink document to say these are my nominated beneficiaries. There's no environmental impact here, and the most important one of Pastel here is the legal side. The legal side here will set the precedent of what's going to happen going forward. So, when we teach financial literacy, it's not just about products. It's about understanding the legal framework those products fall under. As I've mentioned here, we have two separate legal frameworks. We have the Pension Fund and the Long-Term Insurance Act. So you need to understand when you take your products, under which act are they governed by. In this case here, we have a product, a pension fund, that has moved into a living annuity fund. So those are two separate legal entities. As a member, you need to understand the implications of moving your pension fund into a living annuity, how this will affect your beneficiaries, and who is in charge of nominating those beneficiaries. This is the crux of this case here. This is the part that broke me. David Mabuza had started the process of changing his beneficiary on his forms. This was done in May. There's conversations and there's recordings of his intent to change the beneficiary, but he never actually got around it. I've mentioned it earlier about the technology that we have to say, what are we doing as an industry to make this process easier? So the fact that the intent was there, it shows us that he wanted to actually add more beneficiaries, but he never actually got around to it. So as a society, as Abantu, do we understand ukuthi this affects everyone? We have a family here that's in dispute. The family wants the money to be shared equally, not necessarily equally, but for people to get a share of the pension fund because they were dependent on David Mabuza. On the other side, we have a wife who says, I'm the sole beneficiary, and she's got the legal paperwork to prove that she is. So this is why the court froze the money, to say that we need to actually decide what's going to happen. This is a very big case for us. So the big question here is, do we build financial legacies around paperwork and contracts, or do we build financial legacies around social responsibilities according to who you are responsible for? The Pension Fund Act is about protecting your beneficiaries and those that were financially dependent on you. The policies, on the other hand, it's a contract that where you nominate beneficiaries. As much as David Mabuza had an intent to change it, he never got around to actually doing it. This is not just about the 44 million of David Mabuza's pension fund. This is about you and me. Do your beneficiary nomination forms reflect your wishes? Do your beneficiaries know what your wishes are? And also, have you updated your beneficiary nomination forms to reflect your wishes? This is not just about pension funds and living annuities. It's about you and me. Do you understand all of this locomotion could have been prevented had David Mabuza completed what he actually wished to happen? Another thing that we need to also unpack here, as I said, this is about pension funds and living annuities. So the pension funds It's your nomination forms are a guideline to the trustees. So, as I mentioned earlier on, the pension fund is governed by trustees, and your beneficiary nomination form gives them guidelines of your wishes, right? So it's up to the trustees to distribute that money according to their own investigations and who was financially dependent on you, which makes it a trustee decision, no longer your own nominated beneficiary forms. Now, with the life policy, the nomination beneficiary forms, those are golden. Those are the way that the benefit will be distributed. There's no trustees involved. No one's going to ask questions. They just pay out the way you have selected on your beneficiary form. So you might be asking yourself, why didn't David Mabuza move his money from a pension fund to a living annuity? There is tax benefits, and also when you retire, you're required to purchase a pension. And usually a pension fund is limited in paying you out your pensions. You might want to move that into a separate individual capacity because a pension fund is governed by trustees, but when you move it to your own personal capacity in a life policy, you govern what happens to that money. So, and also there's tax efficiencies that we can get into, but we're not going to get technical about that. So it's about receiving an income after you've retired. So that's why you move the money into a living annuity. So you might also be asking yourself, what's the difference between a nomination of beneficiary and your will? Can the will come in here and say what was David Mabuza's wishes or what he wanted to do with his will? So that brings us to another third different legislation of the Act. Now this is estate law, which is a separate legal entity all on its own, which does not even come into pension funds or living annuity. All three of these separate acts are very, very different. So if you have a will, it does not supersede what happens in your pension fund. If you have a will, you cannot nominate on your will what happens to your life policy. If you have a will, you cannot use it to tell the pension fund what to do. If you have a will, you cannot tell a life policy on how they must pay out that will. So basically, each and every one of those three things are very, very different. Your will looks after your assets that you have. The pension fund looks after the pension fund, and your provident fund and your preservation fund. That's a separate legal entity where the trustees will decide how that money gets paid out. And a life policy, living annuity policy, and all those ones that are governed by the Long-Term Insurance Act, that one gets paid according to your beneficiary. So all three of these things must talk to each other. Hence the reason you need to have a financial planner to help you, guide you, and understand what your wishes are. So to make sure that all three of these things talk to the same thing that you had, the same wishes that you had. So just to recap, what we are talking about here is the fact that there's three different laws that come into play when you pass away. There's your will, which is governed by the estate law. There's your pension fund law, which is governed by the Pension Fund Act. And then there's also a long-term insurance policies, which will tell you how your beneficiaries are. And there's also a long-term insurance, which is where you nominate your beneficiaries, and that's how it will pay out. So with this case that we are talking about here, David Mabuza did not finish nominating his beneficiaries on his life policy and living annuity. Hence the reason the case is in court. So here are three hard truths that we need to face. Your money decisions outlive you. If you do not make the right provision and put the right plan in place, those decisions that you have not made will be made by someone else. In this case here, we have a court case. Someone else will decide what David Mabuza's wishes were. Here's the second hard truth. Pension funds are not just about wealth. They are also about responsibility. The Pension Funds Act sees that and understands that. They understand the social responsibility of the pension that you had. It's not just about nominating beneficiaries, but also looking after all those that were financially dependent on you. The third hard truth is the fact that silence costs money. The fact that the financial planning wasn't done correctly on this case and that David Mabuza did not finish his wishes, now the courts get to decide what David Mabuza's wishes are. It's no longer his wishes, but what the court thinks his wishes were. So this is not just about David Mabuza, it's about you and I. If we look in the mirror, if you were to pass away tomorrow, would your family know what your wishes were? Do you have the right plans in place to protect all the other aspects of your life? It's not just about policies, it's not just about pension funds, it's not just about the will. It's about all three of them working together. So, 44 million is a fortune. This 44 million was supposed to bring peace and comfort to the family after the passing of David Mabuza. But what it's actually doing is dividing the family. The deeper question is, what story will our monies tell when we are no longer here? Will they divide the family or will they bring peace of mind? This is where I, Daddy Shabalala, come in. As a financial planner, I can help you set up the right plans in place to make sure that you leave a peace of mind when you are no longer here and not divide the family. Thank you for listening. You may find more information on our website, daddyshabalala.co.za. You can also contact us on the number that will be provided in the description below. You may also follow us on our social media handles. The handles are Daddy the Advisor. Thank you once again for listening.